The silent vanguard. The void between stars had never seemed so empty to Fleet Commander Vexra as he stood on the observation deck of the Dominion, flagship of the Karenni Empire's 7th Armada. His 6 eyes, arranged in perfect symmetry across his broad, slate-gray face, reflected the distant stars like obsidian mirrors. Each of those distant points of light represented another potential conquest, another civilization to be subjugated under the might of the Empire. "How many worlds does this make, strategist Nelvar?" Vexra asked, his voice carrying the metallic resonance typical of his species. The smaller Karenni officer approached, her exoskeleton clicking softly against the polished floor. 2,743 cataloged civilizations, Commander, each now contributing resources and subjects to the glory of the Empire. Vexra nodded, a gesture his species had adopted from one of their first conquests. And how many offered significant resistance? 17 attempted organized military opposition. None lasted beyond 3 lunar cycles of their respective worlds. This was the way of things. For nearly 5 centuries, the Karenni had expanded outward from their homeworld, consuming resources, technology, and sometimes entire species in their relentless march across the galaxy. Their technological superiority was unquestioned. Adaptive shield harmonics that could counter any weapon after minimal exposure, gravity manipulation drives that made their massive ships dance through space with impossible grace, and disintegration arrays that could reduce a planet's surface to molten slag within hours. The scouts have identified another inhabited system on the outer spiral arm. Nelvar continued, projecting a holographic display from her wrist device. Designation S3941. Local species calls it the Solar System. Primary civilization concentrated on 3rd planet. The hologram shifted to show a blue-green world circling an unremarkable yellow star. Technological assessment. Vexra inquired, studying the image with practiced disinterest. Primitive. They've achieved rudimentary space travel within their own system. No evidence of faster-than-light capabilities. Numerous radio and electromagnetic emissions suggest a fragmented planetary governance. Vexra's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. Another easy conquest, then. Send the standard recon squadron. Full assessment protocols. There is one anomaly, Commander. Nelvar hesitated. Our long-range sensors detected unusual energy signatures from their lunar satellite, unlike anything matching their apparent technology level. Curious, Vexra mused. Perhaps they've salvaged technology from another species. It wouldn't be the first time. Monitor closely, but proceed with standard protocols. I want preliminary assessments within 2 cycles. As you command. Nelvar bowed slightly and retreated from the observation deck. Alone again, Vexra contemplated the holographic image of Earth, rotating slowly before him. Something about this particular world tickled at his instincts, the same instincts that had elevated him to Fleet Commander after the Battle of Tannhauser Gate. But even if this species had somehow acquired advanced technology, they were alone, isolated on the fringes of the galaxy. And the isolated always fell to the Karenni. Always. On the dark side of Earth's moon, buried beneath the ancient regolith of the Korolev crater, Captain Maya Chen stood in the command center of humanity's best-kept secret. Around her, technicians and officers moved with quiet efficiency, monitoring screens and readouts that tracked everything from deep space telemetry to the structural integrity of the massive underground facility. "Status report," she demanded, her voice carrying the weight of authority earned through 15 years of service in Earth's Unified Space Command. Commander Jackson approached, tablet in hand. "The Artemis is at 97% readiness, Captain. Final calibrations on the phased array shields are being completed now." Chen nodded, her dark eyes never leaving the main display where 12 red indicators were slowly moving toward Earth's solar system. "And our visitors. Maintaining course and speed. They'll reach Neptune's orbit in 17 hours. For decades, humanity had known they weren't alone. The first signs had come in the form of strange radio emissions from the direction of Ta Ceti. Then came the long-range observations of artificial structures in nearby systems that had previously shown no signs of habitation. Finally, there were the refugees, a handful of alien vessels, damaged and desperate, carrying the survivors of worlds conquered by what they called the Devourers. Earth's governments had made a collective decision that might have seemed uncharacteristic given human history. They chose secrecy and preparation over panic and posturing. The world's best scientists, engineers, and military minds had been gathered under the banner of Project Sentinel, tasked with developing defensive capabilities that might give humanity a fighting chance against a technologically superior foe. The Artemis was the culmination of that project, a warship unlike anything humanity had previously conceived, incorporating both Earth-born innovations and reverse-engineered technologies from the refugee vessels. It was a technological marvel that had consumed the equivalent of several small nations' GDPs over its 15 years of development. And now, it appeared, they would soon discover if that investment had been worthwhile. "Captain," a young lieutenant called from his station, "we're receiving a transmission from UNSC headquarters. Admiral Ketri is requesting your presence for an emergency council meeting." Chen sighed. More meetings, more debate, while the threat grew closer by the hour. "Tell them I'll be there in 30 minutes. Commander Jackson, you have command until I return." The shuttle ride to Earth took less than 15 minutes, another testament to how far human technology had advanced in secret. As the craft descended through the atmosphere, Chen caught glimpses of cities going about their normal business, citizens unaware of what approached from the depths of space. The burden of that knowledge weighed heavily on her shoulders. The United Nations Space Emergency Council chamber was tense when Chen arrived. Representatives from the world's major powers sat around a circular table, faces grim as they watched the holographic display at the center showing the approaching alien vessels. "Captain Chen." Admiral Ketri nodded as she entered. "Please, join us. We were just discussing our options." Chen took her seat, noting the mix of military uniforms and civilian attire around the table. "How much have you told them?" she asked the Admiral quietly. "Everything we know," he replied. "This isn't a time for secrets between allies." The Chinese representative, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, spoke first. "Captain Chen, your recommendation, please. Do we attempt communication or prepare for immediate defensive action?" Chen considered her response carefully. The refugee accounts were consistent. The Karenni do not negotiate. They assess and conquer. Any communication would simply provide them with more information to use against us. "So you recommend a preemptive strike?" The European Union representative sounded alarmed. "I recommend we deploy the Artemis to intercept their reconnaissance force before they can complete their assessment," Chen clarified. "If we can eliminate their scouts before they report back, we might buy ourselves time to prepare Earth's defenses more thoroughly." The Russian general leaned forward. "One ship against 12. Even with its advanced capabilities, those are not favorable odds." Chen's lips tightened into a thin line. "The Artemis was designed for exactly this scenario, General. Its stealth systems should allow us to approach and engage on our terms. We don't need to destroy all 12. Just ensure none of them transmit data back to their fleet." Debate raged for another hour, arguments circling between diplomatic attempts, defensive posturing, and Chen's recommendation for an intercept mission. Finally, the Secretary General called for a vote. The result was narrow, but clear. The Artemis would deploy. As Chen left the chamber, Admiral Ketri caught up with her in the corridor. "Maya," he said, dropping formality for a moment, "I know what we're asking of you and your crew." She met his gaze evenly. "We've been preparing for this moment for years. Admiral, the Artemis is ready. We're ready." He clasped her shoulder briefly. "Earth is counting on you, even if most of them don't know it yet. Godspeed, Captain." 12 hours later, Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the Artemis as it prepared to depart its lunar hangar for the first time. The ship was a marvel of engineering, its sleek, matte black hull designed to absorb rather than reflect both light and sensor suites. At just under 500 meters long, it was smaller than the massive colony ships humanity had been building for interplanetary settlement, but every cubic centimeter had been optimized for combat capability and survival. All stations, report readiness, Chen commanded, settling into the captain's chair. Engineering ready, all systems nominal, came the response from Chief Engineer Tarek. Weapons systems online and calibrated, reported Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. Navigation plotted and locked in, added Ensign Yamamoto. Communications dark as ordered, confirmed Lieutenant Park. Chen took a deep breath, feeling the weight of human history pressing down upon her shoulders. Seal all bulkheads. Initiate launch sequence. The massive hangar doors above them began to part, revealing the star-filled expanse of space. The Artemis hummed with power as its revolutionary drive system engaged, lifting the ship with eerie silence. Stealth systems active, Rodriguez announced. Heat signature suppressed, EM dampening fields at maximum. The Artemis rose from its lunar cradle like a predator emerging from its den, its black hull seeming to drink in the light from the distant sun. As they cleared the lunar surface, Chen gave the order that committed them to their course. Set intercept trajectory. Maximum sustainable speed. Let's introduce ourselves to the Carini. The ship accelerated smoothly, leaving Earth and its moon behind as it streaked toward the outer solar system, where humanity's uninvited guests were methodically moving from planet to planet, scanning and analyzing. On the bridge, Lieutenant Park suddenly straightened at his console. Captain, we're picking up transmissions between the alien vessels. They've detected unusual energy readings from Jupiter's moon Europa. They found our research station, Chen realized grimly. Divert course to intercept the closest scout before it can investigate further. The Artemis changed trajectory, its advanced propulsion system allowing for maneuvers that would have been impossible with conventional rockets. Within hours, they had closed to within sensor range of the nearest Carini scout ship, a sleek, insectoid vessel approximately twice the size of the Artemis. Tactical analysis, Chen ordered. Rodriguez studied her readouts carefully. Their shields appear to be minimally powered, standard configuration for a non-combat situation. Detecting multiple sensor arrays and what appear to be weapon systems, currently dormant. Their hull material is unlike anything in our database, possibly some form of living metal. They haven't detected us yet, Park added. Their scan patterns suggest routine survey operations. Chen considered their options. The element of surprise was their greatest advantage, but once they engaged the first ship, the others would certainly be alerted. Speed and decisive action would be critical. Target their primary sensor array and communication systems, she ordered. Prepare kinetic impact munitions. Let's see how their shields handle good old-fashioned physical force before they can adapt. Weapons locked, Rodriguez confirmed. Ready on your mark. Chen took one last look at the tactical display, visualizing the positions of all 12 Carini scouts throughout the solar system. Once they fired, there would be no turning back. Humanity's first interstellar war would begin here, in the shadow of Jupiter, with a single command. Fire. The Artemis main guns discharged with barely a shudder, sending hyper-accelerated tungsten rods streaking toward the unsuspecting Carini vessel. The alien ship had no time to raise its defensive shields to full power before the projectiles struck with devastating force, tearing through its sensor arrays and communication dish. Direct hit, Rodriguez reported, excitement clear in her voice. Their primary communications are disabled. But the Carini recovered quickly. The damaged scout ship pivoted with startling agility, its weapon systems coming online as it oriented toward the general direction of the attack. They can't see us precisely, Park said, but they're firing spread patterns in our direction. Energy beams lanced through the space where the Artemis had been moments before, but Chen had anticipated this response. Evasive pattern delta. Bring us around for a killing shot on their engine section. The human warship danced through space, its movements unpredictable yet purposeful as it circled behind a wounded Karenni vessel. 2 more kinetic rounds launched from the Artemis, this time targeting what their analysis suggested was the Scout's propulsion system. The impacts were catastrophic for the alien vessel. Secondary explosions bloomed along its hull as systems overloaded and failed. Within moments, the Scout was adrift, its lights flickering and dying. 1 down, Chen announced grimly. But now, the real fight begins. As if on cue, Park's console lit up with alerts. Multiple Karenni vessels changing course, converging on our position. They're communicating on frequencies we haven't seen before. Backup systems. How long until they reach us? Chen demanded. First intercept in 23 minutes, all others within 2 hours. Chen nodded, her expression determined. Then we have work to do. Set course for the nearest Scout. We'll take them one at a time for as long as we can. As the Artemis accelerated toward its next target, Chen allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. Defiance beyond stars. The Karenni scout ship designated Hunter 7 drifted lifelessly through space, its systems dark and silent. Inside the vessel's command center, the few surviving crew members worked desperately to restore power to critical systems, their movements growing increasingly frantic as life support began to fail. Communications remain offline, reported the ship's second-in-command, green blood seeping from a wound on his carapaced head. We cannot alert the fleet. The captain, his exoskeleton cracked and leaking vital fluids, dragged himself to the emergency beacon controls. Then we must ensure our destruction does not go unwitnessed, he rasped, entering a complex sequence of commands. The emergency quantum beacon will transmit our ship's final sensor logs directly to the nearest relay station. With a final surge of effort, he pressed the activation sequence before collapsing beside the console. A small, undetectable pulse of quantum-entangled particles shot out from the dying ship, carrying with it the last observations of the Hunter 7. Grainy images of a sleek black vessel that seemed to absorb light itself, and readings of weapons technology, unlike anything the Karenni had encountered before. Aboard the Artemis, Captain Chen and her crew had just dispatched their 3rd Karenni scout when Lieutenant Park's console emitted an urgent alert. Captain, I'm detecting a massive quantum disturbance approximately 40 astronomical units from our position, he reported, fingers flying over his controls. It appears multiple vessels are emerging from faster-than-light travel. Chen's blood ran cold. How many? Initial count shows 27 distinct signatures. These are much larger than the scout vessels, Captain. On the main view screen, the tactical display updated to show the new arrivals. A fleet of warships arranged in a precise formation as they decelerated into normal space. At their center was a vessel that dwarfed all others, its silhouette resembling a massive predatory insect. They weren't supposed to be here for weeks, Rodriguez whispered, voicing what everyone was thinking. Chen's mind raced through possibilities and scenarios. The scouts must have had some form of emergency communication we didn't detect. Ensign Yakamoto, plot a course back to Earth, maximum speed. Lieutenant Park, send an encrypted burst transmission to UNSEC headquarters. Harbinger protocol activated. As the Artemis changed course, heading back toward the inner solar system at full acceleration, Chen knew they had lost the element of surprise. Now they needed to prepare Earth's defenses for what was coming, and perhaps more importantly, they needed to survive long enough to deliver what they had learned about Karenni capabilities. On the observation deck of the Dominion, Fleet Commander Vexra reviewed the final sensor logs from the destroyed scout ships with growing concern. The mysterious vessel that had attacked his reconnaissance force exhibited technologies that should have been far beyond the capabilities of such a young species. Could they have received assistance? He questioned strategist Nelvar. Perhaps refugees from one of our previous conquests. Nelvar's analysis was typically precise, possible but unlikely to be significant. The design aesthetics are clearly indigenous, though the propulsion and weapons systems show influences we haven't encountered before. More concerning is their stealth capability. Our sensors can barely track them even when we know where to look. Vexra's mandibles click thoughtfully. An interesting challenge, then. Prepare a full battle group. I will lead this conquest personally. Is that necessary, Commander? Nelvar questioned cautiously. This is a primitive world, despite these anomalies. A species capable of destroying 3 of our scout ships deserves respect, Vexra replied. And I find myself curious. There is something different about these humans. I wish to understand what makes them capable of resistance when so many others fell quickly. Nelvar bowed slightly. As you command. The battle group will be ready within the hour. The Artemis streaked back toward Earth, pushing its revolutionary drive systems beyond recommended parameters. Behind them, long-range sensors showed the Carini fleet in pursuit, though the larger warships couldn't match the human vessel's speed. On the bridge, Captain Chen addressed her senior officers in a hurried conference. We've managed to analyze the data collected from our engagements, Chief Engineer Tariq explained, displaying complex diagrams on the central holoscreen. The Carini shields adapt quickly to energy weapons, but they're vulnerable to kinetic impacts, at least the first few times. Their hull material appears to be some form of biomechanical composite that can self-repair given enough time. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez added, their weapon systems are primarily energy-based, disintegration beams, and what appears to be some form of gravity manipulation technology. Extremely powerful, but with noticeable recharge cycles between maximum power discharges. Chen nodded grimly. Any weaknesses we can exploit. Dr. Aisha Chandra, the ship's chief science officer, stepped forward. Potentially. Their communications rely heavily on quantum entanglement for instantaneous transmission across vast distances. However, our readings suggest these systems require enormous energy. They can't maintain them constantly. There's a vulnerability window after each transmission. How does that help us? Rodriguez questioned. We're still outnumbered and outgunned. Chen's eyes narrowed as pieces of a strategy began forming in her mind. It gives us a rhythm to their operations, a predictable pattern we might exploit. Doctor, continue your analysis. I want every scrap of information about their technologies and tactics by the time we reach Earth orbit. As the meeting dispersed, Chen remained on the bridge, staring at the tactical display showing the approaching Carini fleet. They had perhaps 36 hours before the aliens reached Earth, 36 hours to prepare a defense against an enemy that had conquered thousands of worlds. When the Artemis arrived at Earth, they found the planet's defenses on full alert. The secret fleet of 6 additional warships, smaller than the Artemis but built with the same advanced technologies, had taken up defensive positions around the planet. Ground-based weapons installations, hidden for decades beneath innocuous structures or natural formations, were now fully operational and tracking the approaching threat. In orbit, Admiral Katri greeted Chen via secure communication. Your warning gave us time to deploy everything we have, Captain. The civilian population has been informed. No point in secrecy now. Evacuation to the underground shelters is proceeding. Chen nodded grimly. Admiral, I have the beginnings of a strategy, but it will require coordinating all our assets in perfect synchronization. Whatever you need, Chaktri replied without hesitation. The Security Council has granted you tactical command of our defensive forces. Over the next 12 hours, Chen worked tirelessly with Earth's military leadership to implement her plan. The Artemis underwent critical repairs while the data they had gathered was distributed to every ship and weapons platform in Earth's defensive network. When the Carini fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system, humanity was waiting. Fleet Commander Vexra observed the small defensive formation arrayed before the blue planet with something approaching admiration. Most species cowered in fear or attempted to flee when the Carini arrived in force. These humans had chosen to stand and fight, despite the obvious disparity in numbers and firepower. Curious, he mused. Their largest vessel appears to be the same one that destroyed our scouts. Just 7 ships against our battle group. Yet they position themselves as if they believe victory is possible. Perhaps they are simply honorable in defeat, Nelvar suggested. Some species prefer to die fighting rather than submit. Perhaps. Vexra wasn't convinced. Something about the humans' defensive formation seemed deliberate, as if they were inviting a specific approach. Change assault pattern, he ordered suddenly. Full dispersal formation. I want our ships to approach from multiple vectors simultaneously. Nelvar looked surprised. That will reduce our concentrated firepower significantly. Yes, Vexra agreed. But it will also prevent them from focusing their defenses too narrowly. Commence the attack. On the bridge of the Artemis, Captain Chen watched as the Karani fleet split into smaller attack groups, approaching Earth from different directions. They deviated from standard conquest protocol, Dr. Chandra noted with concern. All historical accounts indicated they prefer overwhelming force concentrated on a single target. Chen's expression remained calm. That means they respect us as a threat. Good. It also means they're spreading their communication network thinner. She opened a channel to all Earth defenses. All units, maintain position. Let them come to us. Remember your assigned targets and timing. The Karani attack began with a devastating barrage of energy weapons fire from their forward vessels. The disintegration beams lanced toward Earth's small defensive fleet, only to be met by the advanced shield systems reverse-engineered from refugee technology and enhanced by human innovation. Shields holding at 72%. Rodriguez reported as the Artemis shuddered under the assault. They're probing our defenses, testing for weaknesses. Maintain position, Chen ordered. Let them think their superior firepower is wearing us down. For nearly an hour, Earth's forces absorbed the Karani assault, their shields gradually weakening but still holding. The human vessels returned fire sporadically, causing minimal damage to the alien ships, but giving the impression of desperate resistance. Then Chen saw what she had been waiting for, a series of coordinated energy surges across multiple Karani vessels. They're establishing quantum communication links with their flagship, Dr. Chandra confirmed, monitoring her instruments, likely reporting shield effectiveness and coordinating the next phase of their attack. Chen's eyes narrowed. Now, across Earth's defensive perimeter, human vessels and ground installations suddenly shifted targets, focusing intense fire on specific Karani ships that had just completed their quantum transmissions. The alien vessels, their energy reserves temporarily depleted from the communications process, found their shields insufficient against the precisely timed assault. 3 Karani warships erupted in flames before the others could react to the sudden change in tactics. All units, execute maneuver Theta, Chen commanded. The human fleet broke formation, each vessel accelerating along predetermined vectors that appeared chaotic, but were carefully calculated to bring them into striking position against specific targets. The Artemis dove straight toward the massive Karani flagship, its enhanced engines pushing the ship to velocities that strained its structural integrity. Disintegration beams sliced through space around them, but Ensign Yakamoto's piloting kept them just ahead of the deadly fire. Arm gravitational disruptors, Chen ordered as they closed on the Dominion. This was the most experimental of the Artemis weapon systems, technology designed to temporarily create localized distortions in spacetime, disrupting the Karani's gravity-based propulsion and weapon systems. Disruptors armed and locked, Rodriguez confirmed. Optimal firing range in 15 seconds. Fire when ready, Chen commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them, as Earth's small fleet engaged the much larger Karani force in a desperate gambit. The Artemis released its payload, not a conventional weapon, but a series of devices that activated simultaneously, creating a cascading wave of gravitational distortions around the Karani flagship. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The massive alien vessel's movements became erratic, its weapons fire going wide of intended targets as its systems struggled to compensate for the unpredictable gravitational forces. Direct hit on their primary systems, Rodriguez reported with fierce satisfaction. Their main weapons array is offline. Chen didn't allow herself even a moment of celebration. Bring us around for kinetic strike on their engine section. Maximum impact velocity. Aboard the Dominion, alarms blared as systems failed across the massive vessel. Fleet Commander Vexra gripped his command podium to remain upright as artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. "What is happening?" he demanded, voice raised above the chaos. Nelvar struggled with her instruments. "Unknown technology, creating localized gravity wells that are interfering with our stabilization systems. We cannot maintain weapons lock, and engines are operating at 30% efficiency." Vexra's compound eyes narrowed as he watched the small black human vessel circling back toward his crippled flagship. In 5 centuries of conquest, he had never encountered a species that could so effectively counter Kyrani technology on their first engagement. "All power to forward shields," he ordered. "Prepare for impact." But the humans had anticipated this defense as well. The Artemis suddenly split its attack, releasing a swarm of smaller projectiles that approached the Dominion from multiple vectors simultaneously. The Kyrani shields, already strained by the gravitational disruptions, could not cover all approaches effectively. Multiple impacts rocked the flagship, breaching its hull in several sections. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the vessel as atmosphere vented into space. Vexra watched in disbelief as his tactical display showed similar scenarios playing out across his battle group. The humans had somehow identified the precise vulnerability window after quantum communications and were exploiting it ruthlessly, coordinating their attacks with impossible precision. "Order all vessels to cease quantum communications," he commanded. "Fall back to conventional encrypted transmissions only." But the damage was done. Without the instantaneous coordination provided by their quantum network, the Kyrani fleet's greatest advantage, their ability to function as a perfectly synchronized force, was compromised. From the bridge of the Artemis, Captain Chen watched as the tide of battle shifted. Without their quantum communication network, the Kyrani ships were forced to rely on light-speed transmissions, introducing crucial delays in their coordination. Earth's smaller fleet, though taking heavy damage, was exploiting this disadvantage mercilessly. "Status report," Chen demanded, gripping her chair as the ship shuddered from a glancing hit. "Shields at 31%, Rodriguez replied. "Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7, sealed and stable. Weapons still operational but kinetic ammunition reserves down to 22%. Chen nodded grimly. "And the Kyrani flagship?" "Severely damaged. Their propulsion system is failing and weapons capacity estimated at less than 40%. However," Rodriguez added with concern, "they're concentrating remaining firepower on Earth's orbital defense platforms." Chen studied the tactical display, noting that 3 of Earth's 6 defensive satellites had already been destroyed. If the Kyrani managed to eliminate their planetary defenses, they could still bombard the surface despite the damage to their fleet. "We need to end this now," Chen decided. Ensign Yakamoto, set course directly for the Kyrani flagship's command center. Maximum speed. The bridge fell silent as the implications of this order became clear. "Captain," Chief Engineer Tariq said quietly, "at that velocity, even if we manage to penetrate their hull." "I know," Chen cut him off, "but their command structure is centralized. If we can eliminate their fleet commander, their entire operation may collapse." She opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for potential impact scenario. Those who wish to evacuate to escape pods have my permission to do so." Not a single crew member left their post. The Artemis accelerated toward the massive Kyrani flagship, dodging debris and energy weapons fire as it closed the distance. Smaller human vessels provided covering fire, drawing some of the alien weapons away from the Artemis approach vector. 200 kilometers to impact, Yakamoto reported, his hand steady on the controls despite the suicide run they were undertaking. "Divert all power to forward shields and structural integrity," Chen ordered, "and arm our final package." Rodriguez looked up in surprise. "Captain, the Nova device is untested. We don't know if we're going to die today. Chen interrupted. We're taking them with us. Arm the device. The Nova device represented the absolute pinnacle of human weapons technology, a theoretically controlled miniature supernova contained within a quantum bottle and designed to release its energy in a precisely directed pattern. It had never been tested outside simulation. 100 kilometers, Yakamoto announced. The Karenni flagship grew larger on their view screen, its damaged hull still formidable. Nova device armed, Rodriguez confirmed. Ready on your command. 50 kilometers. Chen took a deep breath. All hands, brace for impact. Lieutenant Rodriguez, on my mark. 20 kilometers. They're concentrating all remaining weapons on us. The Artemis shuddered violently as multiple energy beams struck its forward shields. Warning alarms blared across the bridge as systems began to fail. Shields critical. 10 kilometers. Chen gripped her chair with white knuckles. Mark. Fleet Commander Vexra watched in disbelief as the small human vessel continued its suicidal charge toward the Dominion, despite absorbing weapons fire that should have vaporized it already. Their hull composition, Nelvar reported in astonishment. It's adapting to our energy signatures, dispersing the impact. Vexra felt something he had not experienced in centuries of warfare, genuine fear. These humans were not just fighting with desperation. They were fighting with innovation that defied all Karenni understanding of technological progression. Brace for impact. He ordered, just as his sensors detected an energy buildup within the approaching vessel unlike anything their instruments had ever recorded. The Nova device detonated 3 kilometers from the Dominion's hull. For a fraction of a second, a tiny star burned in the void of space, its energy channeled in a concentrated beam that struck the Karenni flagship with the force of a solar flare. The effect was catastrophic. The directed energy cut through the alien vessel's remaining shields as if they didn't exist, vaporizing a clean path through multiple decks before reaching the ship's core. Secondary explosions bloomed outward from the impact point as power systems overloaded and antimatter containment fields collapsed. On the bridge of the Artemis, emergency systems struggled to compensate for the massive energy backlash from their own weapon. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks as circuit pathways melted under the strain. The Nova device detonated 3 kilometers from the Dominion's hull. For a fraction of a second, a tiny star burned in the void of space, its energy channeled in a concentrated beam that struck the Karenni flagship with the force of a solar flare. The effect was catastrophic. The directed energy cut through the alien vessel's remaining shields as if they didn't exist, vaporizing a clean path through multiple decks before reaching the ship's core. Secondary explosions bloomed outward from the impact point as power systems overloaded and antimatter containment fields collapsed. On the bridge of the Artemis, emergency systems struggled to compensate for the massive energy backlash from their own weapon. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks as circuit pathways melted under the strain. Full reverse. Chen shouted over the cacophony of alarms. Get us away from the blast radius. The human vessel's engines screamed in protest as they pushed beyond safety parameters, dragging the damaged ship away from the expanding sphere of destruction that had once been the Karenni flagship. Throughout the solar system, the remaining Karenni vessels registered the destruction of their command ship and the death of Fleet Commander Vexra. One by one, they disengaged from battle, retreating to safe distances to reassess their situation. For the first time in 5 centuries of conquest, the Karenni Empire had suffered a decisive defeat. 3 days later, Captain Maya Chen stood in the observation lounge of Earth's orbital station, her left arm in a sling and burn scars still visible on the right side of her face. Beside her, Admiral Caftry gazed down at the blue-green planet below. The Karenni fleet has retreated beyond Neptune's orbit, Chatry informed her. Our long-range sensors show them regrouping, but not advancing. Chen nodded. They're waiting for instructions from their empire. This wasn't just a military defeat for them. It was a cultural shock. No species has ever successfully repelled their initial assault. Can we expect them to return with greater numbers? Katri asked the question that had kept Earth's leadership awake for days. Eventually, Chen admitted, but not immediately. They'll want to analyze what happened, understand how we defeated them. That gives us time. Time for what? The Artemis is severely damaged, and